One of the dirty little secrets in woodworking is that box joints, also called finger joints, aren't nearly as easy to make as veterans will tell you that they are. We tell new woodworkers that just because we want to see them suffer like we did. A change as small as 1 or 2 thousandths at each of the fingers can have a huge impact on the fit of this joint. But in terms of box joints, your life just got a bunch better because Incra just released their new iBox system. First, we have to adjust the guide bar that comes with the kit. This is one of Incra's guide bars and adjusts very easily so you can perfectly fit your miter slot and get rid of all the play. The instructions say to check and make sure that this plate is square to the bar, and mine was right out of the box, but if you have to adjust it, you just loosen these 2 screws, tweak the plate, and then tighten them back down. The instruction manual and DVD that come with the iBox really do make it easy to set this jig up and get it ready for use. And you include full setup information for working with a table saw or a router table. And you don't have to buy any additional pieces for either installation. The safety equipment that comes with the iBox is easy to install and easy to use. You do have to pay attention though because the pieces are made to go on this jig one way. But that arrangement's very easy to see if you've actually read the instructions. This clear guard shield lets you see the blade all the time, but protects you from flying debris. And because of where it's placed and mounted, I've never felt like this guard was in the way at all whilst using the jig. Incra is known for making clean, straight jigs, and the iBox is certainly no different. The aluminum extrusions are very light, but very rigid. Incra provides this 1/4-inch thick backing board that's pre-drilled for mounting. You'll notice that it has 2 sets of holes so it can be flipped over and used twice. The smarter folks out there are going to be using this one for a template to make their own backer boards later on. This dial system is what lets you make tiny adjustments to the fit of your box joints and do it simply and reliably. Each of the white hash marks represents a 1/1000th of an inch change. And use that fine little slot that's cut in the silver wheel to align with the hash marks to quantify how big of a change you're making. I know 1/1000th of an inch sounds crazy, but you'll see later that it's not at all. Part of the setup is what Incra calls a KISS calibration. That involves bringing the fingers over till they just touch the blade. Then we lock the jig down and dial it in so that fingers moves about 1/8 of an inch away from the blade. And once this is set, you won't have to redo it unless you change the size of the dado or change to a different machine. I'm leaving the guard off for the first couple of cuts so you can see what's going on. Here we're just making a test cut. And we'll use this to establish the width of our fingers. Then we set that notch over the fingers and turn the adjustment knob until the fingers spread out to touch both sides of the notch. We want just enough upward pressure that you can feel the fingers on the wood when you take it off or put it on. After this, we tweak the adjustment of the support tables and this jig is ready to use. Here I'm going to follow the instructions and we're going to cut our first joint. We put the edge of the board against the outside of the first finger and lock the board in place. As I make the first cut, you'll notice that I'm leaving the front guard off, and that's strictly so you can see the first couple of moves with these boards. When I was actually cutting joints later on, I never removed the blade guard. Now we move that first cut over and put that over the pins and lock it in place again. Now I can go ahead and make the rest of the cuts with the blade guard back in place. After each cut, we move the board over and put that fresh cut over the fingers. This part of it's just like you do with virtually any box joint jig. To set up for cutting the other half of this joint, we take the first board we cut and put the first cut that we made on that one over the fingers. We always do this on the iBox because this is what spaces the second board out for its first cut. Put the second board against the first and clamp the second board in place. Here again I'll leave the blade guard off to show you the start of this cut. Using the other board as a spacer puts this cut right at the edge of the board. Now I can remove the clamp, move the board over and put the edge of that cut against the fingers, and then we go on cutting the rest of them just like we did before. And with the guard back in place, we can go ahead and finish making the rest of the cuts in this board. After the bit of setup to position the first cut, cutting the second board is done exactly like the first. And here's our first joint all assembled. It looks pretty much perfect, except that it was a little tight going together. I had to use a rubber mallet to get this to seat fully. So we're going to try the adjustment part of this jig now. Each of these white hash marks represents a difference in pin width of 1/1000th of an inch. And we use that thin little slit in the bottom of the silver wheel as a sight so we can see how many hash marks we move. To show you how sensitive box joints are to width changes, I'm going to dial in a 3/1000ths change, which should be way too much. I cut fresh edges on both of our boards, and we'll go ahead and cut the joints using the exact same procedures we did before. It's no other changes to the jig. And this is the new joint, and you can see it slips together very easily. With glue, this would probably be okay, but we'd have been better off if we'd only made about 1/1000th and a half change. Being able to make such a small adjustment so easily is what makes the Incra iBox stand head and shoulders above everything else. The instruction manual and DVD both show you how to make center-keyed box joints. And if you play around with that procedure a little bit, you can make some unique-looking box joints, like I'm going to cut here. Keep in mind that this is my first attempt at making this special joint, and I haven't changed none of the fitting settings. And here's my first try at a non-symmetrical box joint. And you can see that the fit is pretty close. You also see there's a little bit of fraying because I changed the cut height and I forgot to change the backer board. I could probably tighten the jig up 1/1000th or so, but with glue and some sanding, you're never going to see any of these cracks. For my first try at a non-symmetrical box joint, I'm happy. So if you want to be happy too when you make box joints, you need to check out the Incra iBox. Just like everything else from Incra, this thing is well designed, very well made, and easy to use.